Today we're going to be watching a video that is quite perplexing indeed. In this video, we find out the story of a formerly atheist engineer who was converted to Christianity by the God Delusion? Yes, the God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. Apparently, this somehow made him a Christian. So let's watch this and see how that happened.
Watched a debate between Richard Dawkins and John Lennox, the latter a professor of mathematics and a Christian apologist. I was especially interested in how Dawkins would respond to challenges by Christian academics. I strongly believed you need to hear both sides of any debate.
Sometimes there are more than two sides to a story. And when it comes to religion, there are just an infinite number of sides. There's not just Christian and atheist. There's Christian, atheist, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu. The list goes on and on and on. I mean, not just like to Muslims, but also there are still people who believe in the old gods, the Greek gods, the Roman gods, the Celtic gods. Plenty of gods out there that people still believe in. You have to sort of like wonder why it's always just, the two.
When I have not done that and have made an ill-informed decision, I've suffered the cost. The cost is often in wasted time of having to do a more thorough job the second time around. That's what I wish I had done with my initial reading of The God Delusion. My reading of that book had been both the start and the end of a very short investigation. I had not asked, what would the opposition say?
So, did the book make him an atheist, or was he already an atheist and just read the book out of curiosity? I'd like to know, but I don't think he answers.
And I wish I had. For the first time in my life, I was hearing a persuasive argument for the Christian faith. I started to see warning signs in the God Delusion. One in particular grew in my mind. Why did Dawkins ruthlessly ridicule anyone who professes a faith?
Because faith is a bad thing, and it opens you up to even worse things. I'm not sure if Dawkins ridicules people necessarily, but The God Delusion is not supposed to be a friendly book. It's supposed to be a book about how faith is bad. So take that into consideration.
There is a constant pattern of ridicule in The God Delusion, both from his own pen and those he quotes. But scientific inquiry is based on calm, logical, analytical interpretation of the evidence. Preconceptions, biases, and emotions are all best left at the door.
The God Delusion is not a science book. The God Delusion does have some science within, but it is not a science book. It's an argumentative book. It's supposed to make points about faith and what it does to the world and other people. It is not supposed to be scientific.
Dawkins seemed to bring a lot of emotion into this discussion.
And also, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with Dawkins bringing a lot of emotion into this discussion? Religion is a very emotional topic, considering all of the harm that it causes throughout the world and has for thousands of years.
When it comes to the God Delusion, there are many examples of Dawkins using ridicule. Dawkins dedicates his book to Douglas Adams, author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Quoting Adams, he writes, "Isn't it enough to see that a garden is beautiful without having to believe that there are fairies at the bottom of it too?"
And, what's wrong with that quote? Is that quote like ridiculing people? Is it being mean? No, he's just saying that everything about the world, the universe, is wondrous, and we should appreciate it without having to invent something behind it that just isn't there. What's wrong with that?
The underlying narrative is that religion should be discarded without too much consideration.
Well, let's refer to Hitchens, who said, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. When we're talking about faith, it is the definition of not having evidence. So, therefore, according to Hitchens' razor, you can dismiss it without evidence.
It is of the same substance as myth and fairy tales. Nonsense. Ridicule.
Nonsense? What do you mean nonsense? What's nonsense about that? The shit is literally fairy tales. I mean, there are unicorns and dragons in the Bible. Come on.
Is never helpful to learning. The best teachers are the ones who communicate a belief that no question is too silly. Dawkins himself criticizes a previous culture that ridicules atheists for their non-belief, not encouraging people to question things or think. Yet by his own ridicule, he is surely guilty of this same crime.
No, I don't think he is, because we are talking about periods of time in which people who were perceived as being opponents of the church were burned at the stake, okay? That's very different than, an atheist professor writing a book where he says, oh, hey, by the way, religion is silly.
Another way that Dawkins discourages further investigation, the notion that the burden of proof lies with the believer.
It absolutely does. If you are making a claim such as there is a God, then you are the one who has to prove that. I, an atheist, cannot prove there is no God. But I don't have to. You have to prove there is one.
Burden of proof is a necessary legal concept, an important one. It provides a safe default answer. However, the concept, it's not helpful when it comes to scientific or general investigation.
What? It absolutely is. I mean, when you're doing science, let's say you're doing some research. Let's say you found something interesting and you're going to make a paper on it. You and your team are preparing to make a paper on it. Before you make this paper, there are certain things you have to do. You have to do a statistical analysis to show that your results are within a certain margin of error. Another thing you have to do is, I guess, test it in a way that indicates whether it passes certain tests. So there's a concept called falsifiability. Basically, if you've got scientific research, you create tests that if the tests fail, your research is wrong. You try to think of the best tests you possibly can, and you perform these tests. And if it fails, you've got problems with your research and need to go back to the drawing board. If your research passes these tests, that's a really good sign. That does not mean you are correct, but it's a good sign. Religion has no such process.
Burden of proof is rarely associated with scientific inquiry. Scientific advancement has come about by a spirit of wonder and of questioning. I decided to study the God Delusion.
Science is not something that you just decide by, thinking, wow, that sure is magical. I'm going to write about that. No, science is a process. It's a very hard process, and this guy just doesn't seem to understand it. It's very interesting to me that I've heard this repeated over and over, but in young earth creationist circles, especially those involved in like academia and these sorts of struggles over like intelligent design, these things are filled with engineers. I guess when you are an engineer, you are prone to seeing design in everything. You're prone to seeing the nature of things in a different light when you are an engineer. And so it's not surprising that an atheist engineer would end up a Christian. But it is disappointing that he doesn't seem to understand how science and the scientific process works, and doesn't seem to understand or care about such things as burden of proof.
Many years after my initial reading, there were many arguments I now saw in a completely different light. The first was the ultimate 74. Who designed the designer? The key for me to unlocking this is the nature of the cause of something that has always existed. It does not make sense to ask what caused God, as God is eternal. That's the same logic one would apply to an eternal universe.
So we've got some big questions that need answers here. First of all, how do you know that the universe isn't eternal in some way? That's a big question to answer. We simply do not know yet if the universe is eternal or if it came into being at some point in the time. Before that question is settled, we know this iteration of space and time came from the Big Bang, but we don't know that we're not in some kind of an eternal multiverse. We don't know that we're not in some kind of eternal recurrence, Nietzsche style. We don't know that. And until we do, it's very odd to say that the universe must have been created, therefore it must have been created by a God. And how do you know that God is eternal? What exactly led you to that conclusion? Because if you're telling me that God is eternal, I would ask, how do you know that? That's just an assertion until you provide some evidence for this claim. And if you say, I got this claim from a book, that is not evidence. That is an assertion.
It is not simply one step backward, as Dawkins suggests. This might seem convenient in the eyes of an atheist, but Christianity has always claimed that God is eternal. Psalm
And that's exactly what it is, a claim, an assertion without evidence.
92, before the mountains were brought forth, or you had ever formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Who designed the designer turns out to be a nonsensible question applied to an eternal designer.
Okay, I'm not sure nonsensible is a word, but no, I've said this a lot and I'll say it again. If your problem with the universe is that it's so complex, it had to be created by something even more complex, you are entering an infinite loop into the past, because that just implies that something even more complex than the creator had to exist to create the creator. You can say that God is eternal and omnipotent and all these things, but how do you know that? How do you know it's not a sort of Star Trek God? Let's say, like, Q from Star Trek. If you've never seen Star Trek, Q is part of a highly evolved species that have godlike powers. They can do anything they want in this universe. They live beyond time and all that, and space and all that stuff. How do you know that the creator of this universe isn't a Q type of figure? How do you know that? Well, put simply, you don't. You're just making assertions that it's some other way. How do you know that it's not a deist God that just created the universe and was like, well, my job here is done. Later, people. How do you know? I want evidence.
Concluded that postulating God is one step further back in a regression. That's incorrect.
How do you know that? I'd like to hear some evidence, please.
The set of rules or laws that evolves is not what is right and wrong, but what is helpful for the time being. On RNA and DNA, a set of instructions is such a good analogy for DNA that it is perhaps more accurate to say that it is a definition. Even the simplest of life forms contain a quantity of coded information that is hard to comprehend. Dawkins admits that chance alone could not explain this digital information.
It's good that there was more than chance involved in the evolutionary process. As we like to call it on this channel, it's survival of the fittest. And that's not a process of chance. I mean, the genetic mutations involved in creating certain types of fitness are certainly a chance sort of thing. However, once that has happened, chance is no longer in play for the most part. Of course, it's always in play to some degree. But if we're talking about survival of the fittest, it's actually less of a game of chance and more about being able to survive certain conditions thanks to these mutations. And we know this happens. I mean, we know that, like, species evolve with these mutations all the time. So it's kind of weird to hear these people saying, like, well, it just seems like impossible that this could ever happen, that things could evolve in this way. I think a decent example is there's a certain kind of bacteria that evolved features to consume nylon. Nylon, if you didn't know, is a human creation. It does not exist in nature. We created that. And that means that nothing had the ability to metabolize it naturally. But, of course, thanks to the process of evolution, they gained the ability to metabolize it. That's just one example of many. And there are some really crazy examples out there. But the key point here is we know it happens. This is not something that just that we haven't observed. We have observed evolution. We have observed the evolutionary process. And small changes like that, just like being able to metabolize nylon when you couldn't before, a series of small changes like that over a long enough period of time leads to enormous, massive changes. Chance is not working alone here. It's not just chance. It's a good dose of chance, but also survival of the fittest. So
the age of the universe does not give enough time for that process to be random. John Lennox and his
it's not random. It's not random.
Book, God's Undertaker, helps me to see the flaw in Dawkins' reasoning. The analogy frequently used is that of randomly selecting letters, often pictures as monkeys hitting keys on a typewriter. Ending up with a work of Shakespeare by randomly hitting the keys is very unlikely, to say the least. It is analogous to climbing Mount Improbable on the vertical face. Dawkins breaks this problem into small chunks. A monkey may well get the first letter correct, analogous to a small step up the slope of Mount Improbable.
This is just an assertion. Again, he is just asserting things. It is not like that. The fact that we have seen evolution happen on very small timescales shows it's not like that. Evolution on our timescales works exactly the way we think it should. We have evidence for it from now, from the current moment in time that bears out its truth. And you can look away from that, but looking away from that doesn't make it go away.
That's where the theory falls through. Dawkins attempts to then lock the correct letter in. Having gotten the first letter correct, the monkey can move on to having a go at the next. But this is not a valid step without invoking intelligence to lock in the first letter.
Yeah, it kind of is, because, you know, when we talk about locking in the first letter, what we're talking about here is a species has a genetic mutation that allows it to survive more easily. So, of course, when it has another one that improves on that feature and allows it to outcompete its competitors, it gets an advantage. That's locked in too. That's how survival of the fittest works. Just because you don't understand it doesn't make it any less real.
It must be declared correct, and that can only happen by comparing it to a right answer. Having the right answer is to have the intelligence Dawkins is seeking to deny. Without locking in that first step, next random step is just as likely to take you back down the mountain as it is up.
Except for the fact that if you have a mutation that has harmful effects in nature, you are likely to be outcompeted by your competitors. That gene will not spread on. And if that happens enough, guess what happens? Guess. I'll leave it to you for a second just to guess. Throw your guess in the comments. What happens if that happens enough? A species dies out, it goes extinct. And we have seen that plenty of times in nature, well before humans arrived on the scene. And now, it's happening in large part thanks to us, but you get the idea.
Disagreeing with an atheist does not make one a Christian. It doesn't even make one not an atheist, so what's next? I decided to investigate Christianity for myself. I Googled churches close by, and I visited one.
Why didn't you investigate Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, so on and so forth? Why didn't you investigate those? Does it not seem possible that those could all also have some truth to them? Does it not seem likely that maybe the place you were born, just because it is a Christian place, doesn't it seem like maybe that isn't an indication of its truth, but merely an indication that that's where you were born, that's the culture you were born into? Maybe the truth was to be found elsewhere.
It was advertising an alpha course for people who want to find out more about Christianity. I arrogantly thought I'd be more educated than everyone else there. Other guests had asked questions.
Well, I wouldn't have thought that about this man in particular, but I digress.
Questions of the Christian faith, many I had not considered. The answers given by the leaders were not only credible, but very convincing. A tipping of the scales was happening.
Yes, this stuff can be very convincing if you don't know what you're talking about and if you don't understand these concepts correctly. I've told this story recently. My mom went to the Creation Museum with, I guess, her church group, and this was in December or something. She went to the Creation Museum, and she found it very convincing. She said, well, they put the science stuff, the atheist secular science stuff here, and then they laid out their response to it here. And their responses were very credible. But the thing is, if you don't know enough about science, what you don't know is this little part of the display here that mentions the secular atheist scientific point of view is misrepresenting it, making it sound like something it isn't. And then they're responding to a straw man that they themselves made a lot of the time. And even if that weren't the case, even if they gave a real scientific explanation over here, and then their response over here, if you don't know enough about science to fully understand the statement that's being made over here, but you are a Christian or from a Christian background, then this one seems at least as reasonable, doesn't it? Because you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And that's a big problem that a lot of people have, this guy included. This guy, it should be apparent from what he said so far, did not know enough about science, the scientific revolution in our times, does not know enough about evolution, doesn't know enough about these things, and some people were able to take him for a ride.
Dawkins' atheism was losing explanatory power. The Christian faith was gaining it. I now understood that word, faith, in a very different way. It would previously have made me roll my eyes in disdain, but faith did not mean the blind faith that Richard Dawkins pours scorn on.
Okay, give us some evidence. Let's hear it, buddy. Come on.
This new faith did not require normally rational people to ignore the evidence. I found the Bible to be more coherent than I ever imagined.
Well, that's got to be a first, huh?
The Bible is a collection of books authored by different people at different times, and yet it has threads woven through it that are hard to explain without a single inspiration.
No, it really doesn't. I mean, they were building on each other. It wasn't like this was all made in a vacuum, that each author was just out there writing their own things and had never heard of the others. No, these were based on oral traditions. They had plenty of time to sit down and write these things out. And that's not that miraculous. It's just not. It's not miraculous at all.
Found the Bible to be beautifully curated. Some of the passages have a deeply rich architecture. I have found the Bible to be more relevant than I ever thought it.
You know what? Me too. Just look at Ezekiel 23:20. Stop this video right now. If you've never seen Ezekiel 23:20, stop this video right this second and Google it. Ezekiel 23:20. It is the most beautiful verse in the Bible, and it will be an inspiration to all of you. Are you Googling it? You should be.
Describes a humanity that can be simultaneously good and broken. Humanity demonstrates traits.
Hold on. Wait. The Bible says no man is good but God. It says that straight up. So, no, actually, read your Bible more closely, my guy.
Of kindness, creativity, generosity, and love, and yet that humanity is flawed. It demonstrates selfishness, greed, envy, a dangerous disregard for our environment. Self-centeredness is proven true time and time again.
And Jesus will not save you from these things. You know what will save you from these things? Trying to be a better person, going to therapy, get some therapy. If you think you are a selfish person, if you think you're a bad person, if you think you've hurt people, what you need isn't Jesus. What you need is therapy. Jesus won't help you. He won't come down here and solve your problems. In fact, I have noticed in my own life that people who just give all their problems to God are worse people. They just are, because they're not actually responding to their problems. They're not actually engaging in personal growth and development that's very important in the human experience. And, I think this all goes back to what Nietzsche calls the negation of life, that religion encourages you to deny things and deny things about yourself for a reward in the hereafter. And it's essentially just taking away from a person's life, which is very sad to me. But again, what I'm saying is Jesus won't save you from yourself.
These are timeless truths evidenced by what we see around and within ourselves. The Bible teaches that putting your faith in Jesus is the start of a new life.
Often a very bad one. I mean, how many people can I honestly say that I've seen convert to Christianity and become better people? Let's see. Zero. None. Not a single one I can think of. Now, how many people have I heard of that have shed their faith and become better people? Well, just go to the Mormon Stories podcast with John DeLynn, and you will see person after person after person who quit the Mormon faith and found themselves much better people. And they're not the only ones. I mean, I've known plenty of people who have left the Protestant churches here and become better people. I have known lots of religious people that deconverted, and they're good people now, whereas maybe before they were kind of questionable. So these people, they think they're becoming better when they convert. But from the perspective of an outsider, what are they really becoming? They're becoming more closed-minded, more judgmental, and more bigoted. It's the unholy trinity of terrible. So thanks for that, religion.
Those who follow Jesus, God grows the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
All things, all traits very rare to find in Christians and Christianity, especially in America at this point. America is not full of those people. Who do the people who think of themselves this way support politically? I'll give you a second to figure it out and tell me if it sounds like those traits.
This has been my experience. Excerpts are from Coming to Faith through Dawkins. 12 essays on the pathways from new atheism to Christianity by former atheist and Oxford professor Alistair McGrath and Dennis Alexander.
Yeah, so I guess this guy wasn't even the guy who was converting, but well, thanks for that, I guess. Let's just watch a little bit more of it and see if maybe it is one of those people, but I guess it's not. So thanks for leading us nowhere, my guy.
Indeed, I have found that has been my experience as well.
What the fuck? Really? Are you serious right now? So this guy just told a whole story like it was his, but it was excerpts from somebody else's book? Well, man, I tell you what, if that isn't the most depressing thing, but, whatever, it happens. I do like getting taken for a ride sometimes. I feel like I just got taken for a ride, but no shame in that. So, what can we say here? We can say this was stupid. Not really worth much time, was it? And I'm sorry for leading you all on this terrible journey through this nonsense, and I hope you can forgive me for that.